Well, good morning, everyone. Pleasure to see everyone here this morning for our worship service. And I hope as we dedicate our hearts together to God that our voices will be an acceptable sacrifice of praise to Him. Today, I'd like to spend some time looking at a passage that from the book of Proverbs that does something interesting with the idea of wisdom. Proverbs is a book focused on wisdom entirely. That's the whole point of a proverb, is to give you a short saying or a short passage containing many sayings which have in them the idea of wisdom condensed and put into as simple terms as possible. This is why sometimes Proverbs can even seem contradictory to each other. Within just a few verses in the book of Proverbs, you have one verse that says, "Answer a fool according to his folly," and then, "Do not answer a fool according to his folly." Sometimes wisdom can be applied situationally, and it takes wisdom to know how to do that. And our focus today is going to be on that wisdom itself. The first few chapters of Proverbs does something quite interesting with wisdom as a concept, which is that it personifies it in the form of a woman. I'd like to take some time to look at this character of Lady Wisdom, some of the things that she represents, and some of the ways that the Bible speaks about her as a character or a personification of this idea of wisdom, and what we can learn from that those passages here in the Scriptures. Starting in chapter 1, we read a few verses where this character first shows up, and this is specifically in a section that's often referred to as the prologue to the entire book. All right, so in chapter 1, verse 20, we see wisdom show up in this way. "Out in the open, wisdom calls aloud. She raises her voice in the public square. On top of the wall, she cries out. At the city gate, she makes her speech. How long will you who are simple love your simple ways? How long will mockers delight in mockery, and fools hate knowledge? Repent at my rebuke. Then I will pour out my thoughts to you, and I will make known to you my teachings. But since you refuse to listen when I call, and no one pays attention when I stretch out my hand, since you disregard all my advice and do not accept my rebuke, I in turn will laugh when disaster strikes you. I will mock when calamity overtakes you. When calamity overtakes you like a storm, when disaster sweeps over you like a whirlwind, when distress and trouble overwhelm you. Then they will call to me, but I will not answer. They will look for me, but they will not find me. Since they hated knowledge and did not choose to fear the Lord, since they would not accept my advice and spurned my rebuke, then they will eat the fruit of their ways and be filled with the fruit of their schemes. For the waywardness of the simple will kill them, and the complacency of fools will destroy them. But whoever listens to me will live in safety and be at ease without fear of harm." The interesting thing about wisdom here as the character, as this personification of the idea of wisdom, is multifaceted, but a couple of the points that I want to focus on today are the fact that she is characterized as a person who lives among people in a city sort of a setting. It shows up here. She's giving her speech, she's giving her proclamation here in the public square or on top of the wall at the city gate. All of these are high traffic areas. If you want to get people's attention, these are places you can go and shout your message and other people will hear it. And also, the other part about wisdom that's interesting as a character is that she specifically is seen as a woman giving an invitation to come and learn from her, to be mentored by her, to have her counsel taken and applied to you. And what we see later on in chapter 9 is that a similar treatment is given to the character of folly or foolishness, that the opposite of wisdom is also personified as a woman here, and she is sort of this character who calls out and tempts people to do stupid things instead of wise things. And these two opposing forces stand as a way to demonstrate these two options you have. Either listen to wisdom, take guidance, fear the Lord, or don't. Those 2 points, those two perspectives are represented as people in this way. So one of the questions you might have, first of all, considering all of the other ways these characters could be portrayed, both wisdom and folly, why in particular would wisdom be dwelling among people and be someone who is out proclaiming, "Come to me and I'll teach you what to do"? And number two, why in particular is she described as being a woman? Now, there's lots of cultural reasons why you might want to ascribe masculine or feminine traits to a sort of idea or a concept, and there are multiple reasons why that might help to convey some sort of a cultural nuance in one way or another. I'll give you an example. If I ask you to picture justice as justice is depicted in artwork, what is the picture of justice that comes to our common idea in our mind? It's a woman wearing a toga, she's holding a scales, and is wearing a blindfold. And that idea of justice is not based on necessarily any belief that there is such a person as justice who we need to ascribe any sort of reverence or actual personhood to, but rather that she stands in for the concept of justice, and her blindness to the world with the blindfold shows that she can be impartial, and the scales show that it's simply a matter of facts. We can weigh what is just versus what is unjust on those scales of justice. And all of those sort of symbols contribute to this understanding of the concept of justice and help us to convey an idea that we hold together as a society. And there's cultural reasons and baggage and history behind why all those symbols are there as well, which are not super important. The important part is, if I show you a picture of that lady with a blindfold, you know what that's supposed to mean. The same thing is happening here with wisdom. And there's a significance to each part of her description that I'd like to spend just a little bit of time on as we go part by part. But first of all, I'd like to read some more of wisdom speaking here in chapter 8 of Proverbs. So we'll turn over a couple of chapters to chapter 8 and read a few verses from where this character begins to speak again. Starting at the beginning of the chapter, she's described again as being in the public places, in places where people will find her at the highest point along the way, where at crossroads where the paths meet, by the gate to the city, at the entrance to the city. There's all of these places where you can't miss her. You can't miss her voice. She is calling out to you and summoning you to learn. And she says that she's offering truth over lies. She's offering wisdom over foolishness. She's offering intelligence over simplicity. And prudence is another word that comes up a lot. In verse 12 in particular, it says, "I, wisdom, dwell together with prudence. I possess knowledge and discretion. To fear the Lord is to hate evil. I hate pride and arrogance, evil behavior and perverse speech. Counsel and sound judgment are mine. I have insight. I have power. By me kings reign and rulers issue decrees that are just. By me princes govern and nobles, all who rule on earth. I love those who love me, and those who seek me find me. With me are riches and honor, enduring wealth and prosperity. My fruit is better than fine gold. What I yield surpasses choice silver. I walk in the way of righteousness, along the paths of justice, bestowing a rich inheritance on those who love me and making their treasuries full." Now, before I continue on, I'd like to put this into just a little bit more context. In the last couple of chapters, at the end of chapter 6 and in chapter 7, there is a strong warning against adultery, against going astray and finding an adulterous woman to be partnered with. And this is book at the beginning is addressed from King Solomon, and it's in verse 8 specifically of chapter 1 says, it's "Listen, my son, to your father's instruction." So you could see why, if this is being passed from a king to his son, here's how you should behave: beware of women. Lesson that Solomon is trying to teach without having learned himself. He had plenty of problems by taking on too many wives, and we can go into that story another time. And also just seems to be a problem with his family too, because we know David had that issue as well. So he's very strongly warning against real problems with real women, right, in this idea of adultery. And so when he sets up wisdom, does he portray wisdom as a partner? It's like, don't go off and cheat and find these adulterous women, but instead find wisdom and marry her. Not exactly. In fact, wisdom seems to be a character who has some sort of a mentorship role. The wisdom here is like a mother or an aunt or someone in that sort of a role, where she will take the foolish under her wing and protect them and help them to grow and mature, and also to guide them. This is a teacher that's wisdom, not a partner, not a lover. And specifically, she's also portrayed as almost this prophetic type of a character, or this character who has some divine properties as well, here in verse 22. Maybe you could even call her almost an angelic kind of a figure. "The Lord brought me forth as the first of his works before his deeds of old. I was formed long ages ago, at the very beginning, when the world came to be. When there were no watery depths, I was given birth, and when there were no springs overflowing with water, before the mountains were settled in place, before the hills I was given birth, before he made the world or its fields or any of the dust of the earth. I was there when he set the heavens in place, when he marked out the horizon on the face of the deep, and when he established the clouds above and fixed securely the fountains of the deep. When he gave the sea its boundary, so the waters would not overstep his command, and when he marked out the foundations of the earth. Then I was constantly at his side. I was filled with delight day after day, rejoicing always in his presence, rejoicing in his whole world, and delighting in mankind." So now, what is this character being portrayed as now? We've gone from a woman standing in the street corner calling people, "Come to my home and I'll teach you, come eat my food from my table," to being this almost divine sort of a being here, who was there at the beginning in the creation of the world. Well, if I asked you what your intelligence is and who your wisdom is, as a part of you, can you separate your thoughts and your intellect and the knowledge you have from yourself? Is that a different person from you? Is the way you think about things and the thoughts that occur in your mind and the things you speak to guide others, do those things come from someplace other than within your own mind? As humans, we're an imperfect parallel to the Lord, but for human purposes, you have to speak in human terms. And in this case, the wisdom that was the first creation that God made is sort of the thoughts of his own mind being personified here. Again, I don't think this is meant to depict any sort of literal or specific being. In fact, the last time I preached on this, I talked about a heresy or a sort of a strange teaching that was brought up, where this is a potential person of God, the wisdom of God. And I didn't want to emphasize that this time, so I didn't bring it up until just now. But the point is being made that God's wisdom, personified here as this woman, is the reason why the world was set in motion the way it was. They're side by side with God in this picture, watching all of his wisdom play out as he sets the world in motion. God's wisdom was always with him. And so, given that amazing origin for God's wisdom, given that eternal history, right, all the way back to before time began, wisdom was always there because it was always part of God, always belonged to God, even as the world was being formed. Then she comes back down to earth. Verse 32, it says, "Now then, my children, listen to me. Blessed are those who keep my ways. Listen to my instruction and be wise. Do not disregard it. Blessed are those who listen to me, watching daily at my doors, waiting at my doorway. For those who find me find life and receive favor from the Lord. But those who fail to find me harm themselves. All who hate me love death." Again, our picture that's being painted here, our illustration that's being put forward with words, is wisdom as this woman who invites you into her home to help set you on the right path. A mentor who guides you, who can improve your life through her teaching and her guidance. So, what is the difference between having wisdom be a woman here versus simply talking about God's wisdom and setting it forth as teachings that come from him? Why is the Proverbs writer using this picture of this mentor figure, this woman, as a guide and a teacher? The significance of this, I think, is very simple. It gives us a very particular set of traits and characteristics that we would expect to see in an older woman who is a mentor and a guide for us versus what we would see from even a father figure. Especially if we're going with stereotypes and broad pictures. Obviously, there are strict and overbearing and even evil women who will abuse and harm children and teach them the wrong things and do all these horrible things to them. But, if you think of a motherly, grandmotherly aunt figure, someone who is there to guide you and take care of you, and you would think of her in a different light than you would think of a father figure or a grandfather or someone whose role has some of those more masculine social traits. And it also sets up this sort of counterpoint and this contrast with folly as being a woman who invites you to do bad things. We're going to read that next. In chapter 9 and verse 10, we see this: "The fear of the Lord is the beginning of wisdom, and knowledge of the Holy One is understanding. For through wisdom your days will be many, and years will be added to your life. If you are wise, your wisdom will reward you. If you are a mocker, you alone will suffer. Folly is an unruly woman. She is simple and knows nothing. She sits at the door of her house, on a seat at the highest point of the city, calling out to those who pass by, who go straight on their way, 'Let all who are simple come to my house.'" Now, wait a minute. That sounds really familiar. That's the same description that was given to wisdom. But what is the consequence of listening to folly's invitation instead? "Let all those who are simple come to my house. To those who have no sense," she says, "stolen water is sweet, and food eaten in secret is delicious. But little do they know that the dead are there, and that her guests are deep in the realm of the dead." So, what is the difference between these two characters? And what is the lesson we're trying to learn? Well, wisdom says, I have plenty to eat because I know how to take care of my own family, and so in my own household, I have an abundance. She sends out her servants there in verse 3 of chapter 9, wisdom does, to bring in people. She has a household enough that her servants have time to go bring in people so that she can feed them and take care of them. Call out to them so that she can guide them on the right path. Whereas folly sits around at the door of her house, sits around wherever she can get people to come, and lures them into her home so that they can waste away and die on her stolen food. So, what is the contrast that is being made here? We've got this wise, feminine character of wisdom, this woman who will guide you, help you, correct you when you do wrong, teach you the ways of the Lord. And then you've got this evil character of folly. But they both have the same invitation. They both say, "Let all who are simple come to my house." So, the fear of the Lord is the beginning of wisdom, and knowledge of the Holy One is understanding. You see, in order to even know what wisdom is in the first place, to be able to accept the right invitation, you need to know God. To even be able to discern who the person is that you follow when she says, "All who are simple, come to my house," you first need to know God. And then you'll be able to recognize his wisdom when she calls out to you. Then you'll be able to recognize the one who's going to guide you, set you on the right path, correct you when you're wrong, and the one who's going to sit around and contrast her with the one who's going to sit around and mock everybody who tries to follow wisdom while she and her followers waste away. For those who find wisdom find life and receive favor from the Lord. You know, it's interesting to look at these passages and sort of set them in the context here of this character who represents this big, broad idea of wisdom. What does it mean to be wise? What does it mean to do the right thing? And I think the other thing that wisdom does for us, and this is the final point I'll make about why this character is personified in this way, is by being this female leader, by being a motherly figure who brings people in and takes care of them in that way, she sets herself apart from God the disciplinarian. And this is not a contradiction. It's a complementary part to that. God, who comes down and gives you the law, especially in this Old Testament era when the Proverbs were being written, corrects you through punishment. Wisdom, in the picture that Solomon and the people who compiled this book along with him, the character that's being put together here is someone who prevents that punishment by guiding you right in the first place. And so the wisdom character stands in a place where we could have a gap in our symbols and our understanding of the world. Not necessarily in trying to create some sort of a, replacement for God or some other form of God that needs to stand there, but simply a character that we can think of as a representative of this concept that we ought to embody of wisdom, of faith in God and trusting in what he would have us to do, of understanding the Lord and therefore gaining understanding. I hope this lesson has been beneficial for you today and one that we can take and we can apply to our lives. If you're wondering how to apply this, though, if you're wondering how to get wisdom, the first thing you need to do is pray. James tells us that God is generous in answering prayers for wisdom. The second thing we need to do is listen to the call of wisdom. When an opportunity comes to learn, then take it. Because the only other choice you have is to listen to the call of folly and fall into even greater mistakes. I hope this lesson has been beneficial for you today and one that we can take and apply to our lives, and it can encourage us as we go throughout our week. If anyone is subject to the gospel this morning and needs to be baptized, or if you need prayers for restoration or encouragement, if we could do anything to help you in any way, we'd invite you to come forward as we stand and sing.